Welcome to another edition of DUTV Special or Special. Tonight we have a special guest, Professor Jorma Routtي of CIM Creative Industries Management, Aalto University of Helsinki, former Director General of Research at the European Commission, as well as President of the Finnish National Fund for R&D, Sitra, Dean of Helsinki University of Technology and a visiting scientist at CERN, Geneva. His numerous honors include a Fulbright Scholarship, an Eisenhower Exchange Fellowship and others. Dr. Routtì is fluent in English, Swedish, German and French, Finnish naturally. He holds a PhD and several honorary doctorates. We are so pleased to have him with us tonight. Good evening, welcome.
Well, it's very nice to be in this beautiful city, in this nice country. This is not the first time, but every time it's a great pleasure coming here. And I think this time we have an important mission here. We do have a big conference on advancing tourism, which is one of the major economic activities in Croatia, but not only here, but in the region, looking at collaboration, best ways of having
various
win-win.
countries have joined in the conference, correct?
Yes, this has been a two-day conference attended by as many as 19 nationalities, not only from the region, but also from the north of Europe, from the United States and so on. And I think that's good because today most things are of global nature. I would say, for instance, tourism, one of the biggest area of tourism growth in Finland is the Chinese and Japanese, because we have a number of direct lines, and many people come there just to see the northern lights, the darkness. Of course, it's easier to attract people with the sun and sea. With the
midnight sun, naturally, in Finland.
I've been sun, yes. But more and more also in the tourism, it is both the cultural aspect, the history, which is interesting, and I think one general trend is also towards active participation, sports related, whether we go skiing in the Alps, we can play beaches here, we can go to playing golf. So not only have one clientele group, but to have offerings for a lot of different types of people. That will help also to extend the seasons, so they would not be just confined to...
It will be quite pleasing for us all here to do that, because Dubrovnik, the region, the whole region really basically, it's its main industry, tourism.
Well, we have in Finland about 6 million tourists a year. You have about 15 million. We are a country of 5 million, so it's a fairly large number. But we could be envious of you with the ease of attracting so many tourists. At the same time, I think I have to be careful in planning the future activities so that we stay on sustainable way, that we don't destroy the coastlines with too aggressive building. We maintain the cultural heritage and we develop activities which are in line with the economic, environmental and social sustainability.
It is always a matter of question which is brought forth precisely along those lines, which is what do we build, what do we do and yet preserve? And it's always a big question. It was recently looming in Dubrovnik as well, because we're, as you might well know, we have possibly a large area being built as a new resort, quasi-resort, and so on. But the whole world is building, the whole world is connecting, and there are lessons to be learned. And being at the conference, I've heard it was a pleasant surprise. I'm not quite sure how I escaped not to know that. However, Finland can offer many lessons that Croatia should listen to, because there are similarities. Number of people, although Finland is larger, economy, that is knowledge economy, the twist that occurred in people's minds, the whole country, the push behind it, the leaders that brought it forth, but the country supported it, and it was just an amazing thing to turn around from such economy in the 90s to what we have today.
Well, that is true. That I think there's been a fair amount of interest in the case of Finland, because we were able to recover from a deep economic recession in the early 90s, running out of steel, or steam rather, in the old industries. Forest is still very important, but used to be the backbone of the whole economy. Today, there are new things, high technology, telecommunication, everything that goes together with creating knowledge and converting that into economic and social benefit. So there are really two things in the world which are affecting everybody. One is globalization, where we see the traditional labor-intensive industries moving away from high-cost countries into Asia, North Africa, today Malaysia, Indonesia. And we see the emergence of big powers once again, like China and India, who used to be the biggest powers until 1700. And then Europe, United States surfaced, but now China is certainly coming back. The other general direction is moving towards knowledge. Knowledge is used for sustainable future, but knowledge is also very attractive as a business concept, because if you sell knowledge, you don't lose it. You don't have to start again like building a ship or building a house. So we have seen over and over again that small knowledge-based companies, maybe emerging from a garage, can grow in a very short time to world dominance. And this is actually particularly interesting for new players, for new countries, for small countries, which would have a very hard time starting to compete with steel industry, with Nippon Steel, Thyssen and US Steel, to start competing with Toyota and General Motors. Rather to have small companies which very often in collaboration with large corporations can be very successful.
Apparently, a lot of folks in Finland thought along those lines, because we have, if I'm not mistaken, about 70% of the private funding going into the projects, into the research, into development, which has also another interesting thing about it. The funds are not pumping directly into one of the areas, rather it's a systemic approach which sees where to pull, where to push, so the whole system would go forth. Is that pretty much correct?
Well, we have been talking very much about the entrepreneurial spirits during the conference, and that applies to every enterprise. Most of the time, maybe the entrepreneurial spirit is more important than the idea, the knowledge. You can go through hard rock if you so decide. But the particular area is also the conversion of scientific knowledge into successful companies. Not necessarily scientific, but high value added thing. This we see in biotechnology, where the development times are typically 1 or 2 decades, where the costs are hundreds of millions, and that can be only done with partners in the major pharmaceutical industry. But then we have new areas like games, social media and so on, where in a very short time, even in small countries, we have seen companies rising out of nothing. We started in Finland a creative industries fund about 12 years ago. Today, gaming industry is quite big. The turnover is more than billion. There are about more than 200 companies in Finland. Some of the most successful are Rovio, who invented the Angry Bird. The new one is Supercell, which is only a few years old. They employ almost 100 people. They have a turnover of 600 million and make a profit of 400. But I'm personally interested also in the high value added content when applied to healthcare, education, tourism and so on, to make use of the excitement of the games by combining that with, let's say, something else than just gaming.
There are lessons, well, each country is of course different, people are different within those countries, however there are things that can be shared, some knowledge can be passed forth, perhaps with little modification can be even applied other places such as in Croatia, but Finland, what amazes me is that from perhaps 50 years or so, 40 years or so, a certain economy driven by products and timber of much you have, and still a huge force in it, but to switch onto a, if I may call it so, a new platform of thought and a push toward new economy. Are there certain, what were leading thoughts? How did you go about it? Are there certain pillars of it?
Yeah. Well, knowledge economy is, according to most concepts, based on a number of things. 4 major pillars. One is education, very obvious. economic regime, no corruption, good government, working banks, information and communication technologies, which can really change the country in a very short time, as we have seen in many parts of the developing world, Africa, and then the innovation system which translate the knowledge into economic and social benefit. But these things are particularly demanding for small countries, because if a small country has research activity in all fields, we will have a thin layer of knowledge in all fields. But that's no good for anything in today's world.
You have to pick and choose.
You have to be the best in the world. And what are the areas you want to be best in? That's a difficult thing. Of course, there are natural choices. In our case, it was raw material based, forest technologies. In your case, it's natural beauty, history, being based on tourist industry. But then you also have to allow whatever flowers there are to bloom fully. Nobody decided ahead of time that Finland would be the most successful country in telecom. Nokia grew from small company, multidisciplinary company, in the world's biggest telecom company. A few years ago, they still made 15 telephones a second, 1.5 million a day, not in Finland, but in China, Taiwan, Brazil, and had about 40% market share in the world. And the market capitalization was huge, almost 300 billion. But it's a volatile field. Today, Nokia has sold its mobile phones, and they concentrate on telecom more for the professional world, linkages and so on. And that's a very good thing that there is this volatility, because that always opens new possibilities for new players, which in this case can be also small and new players. But the choice, what are the areas you want to succeed, those are difficult to make. And I don't think the government can decide that ahead of time, but you have to have a lot of activity, and some of that will be successful.
There is certainly those can be quantum leaps, and it's a smart thing, and it's a great thing if one can use volatility to its advantage, basically to feel where to go and pursue it properly. But it all should probably begin with a good education system, I suspect.
Yes.
If it's a knowledge economy, it's one of the pillars you mentioned, of course.
Yes.
Is there an education system Finland follows or aims to follow?
Well, education, of course, is very important. The lead times are long, as we know. Delivery time for a baby, 9 months. Delivery time for an engineer, economist, more than 20 years. So it's not a quick fix.
It's not a quick fix, no.
Quick fix. But it's good to have a good basic education for the general population. We had more than 100 years compulsory education for everybody. Today, more than half of the age group goes to university. Now, some of those will be frustrated because they don't get a job immediately, and that's the same thing everywhere in Europe. But like in my case, I had an education where my professor used to say that his students are equally incompetent for any job. And that's a very good qualification to have in the world, where there are all the time new things popping up. There's computers, internet, lasers, social media, and so on, for which nobody has education to begin with. So it's easy to go these new areas if you have a general open mind and good basic education.
It's a great thing for particularly smaller countries, for we can become leaders, as you said, in one particular or two things.
Yes.
At this conference, which is a nice title, is towards green growth. It's very symbolic of where we're going. It's very symbolic of the mass mind of the tourism experts. We are moving toward a tourism which is aligned with European policies 2020, which is of course aligned with where we think the whole world is going. So where are we going?
Well, Croatia is a fairly new member of the European Union. I used to be in charge of the research programs. I still believe that international collaboration, European collaboration are very much worthwhile. And they're very much worthwhile in particular for small countries. If you go to big science, space, particle physics, astronomy, small country has no chance except to build a small telescope, which is not very exciting. So for small countries can become members in large systems. The second thing is that Europe is a very fragmented in terms of knowledge map. Small country cannot cover all the fields, but they have to be good in certain fields. But they can get much better and stronger by aligning themselves with partners in other countries. So typically if you work with 5 or 6 partners, you have access to 5 times more knowledge. And thirdly, I think would say that there are so many things one simply cannot address alone. One cannot address alone the climatic change and response to that. One cannot map the human genomes alone. One cannot develop telecom or traffic standards alone. So aircraft industry today is a network of European companies, and you can make toilet seats and be an important part of Airbus. Nothing wrong with that.
It is a fine art to actually combine such cooperation and be a competitive player.
Yes.
Finland has succeeded in it. It's shared the knowledge, it imbibed the knowledge, and yet it got, according to reports, quite competitive among the top.
Well, sometimes people ask me, what is the secret of Finnish success in creating this knowledge-based economy? I sometimes say, I don't recommend the recipe. Get yourself in deep trouble in order to see that your current industries, old industries are not competitive enough. Then you have to go somewhere else. But you have to have a little bit of courage to go to new fields. So sometimes, half jokingly, we ask, what is the secret of Finnish success? What is a common feature of the sports that Finns are good at? I think they are fairly good in Formula 1 driving. I think we have 3 drivers now. We're very good in rally driving, ski jumping, ice hockey. What is a common feature? You must wear a helmet, which means that you have to be able and willing to take risks, but you cannot be foolhardy. Otherwise, you lose your neck very soon.
Indeed.
And that, I think, applies in general to entrepreneurship, that you have to have the courage to move ahead.
It is one, we don't have much time left, but I would ask you one more thought. One of your, well, it's a citation, I believe, referencing actually you, that your feeling was interesting in terms of interaction in a certain evaluation, or rather interaction when creating any kind of a project. You wanted to see a multidisciplinary approach, but you also wanted to see it go to the end, not just to say an idea, but rather to dissect it, analyze it, propose the solution, if you will, or the whole plan, and then bring it forth to policymakers. Is that along your thoughts?
Yeah. I would think that one of the major challenges for the researchers is to integrate the findings into policy alternatives, estimating their cost, benefit, impact and risk. Then it's up to the policymakers, the ministers, to decide, based upon their constituency and their value system, what is the best avenue. But far too often we leave the findings too immature and dump or load policymakers with too much data and information, when we should actually develop the higher levels of knowledge, understanding and wisdom, which are the levels at which the policy decisions should be made.
It would be difficult to criticize a knowledge economy because of a certain success that it had had, and you can certainly back that up with an argument. However, on the other hand, there's a good thought in this particular booklet, I think, that I've read, which says that certainly it's not an easy thing to reach and do, but once you do, there's no security in it. You always have to keep developing. You have to go forth with it. You cannot get stale with knowledge.
Well, but that's a very good part of it, because if the world would be cast in concrete and you're on the bottom of the pile, that you are bound to stay there. So the very fact that it's constantly moving opens new avenues all the time, and especially for small and new players. I think one important element has been the education of decision makers. We have for more than 30 years taken every member of the parliament, that means by definition every future minister, into a national strategy economic policy course. And that has really helped to shift the balance from income redistribution into wealth generation, to have a common goal, which is a win-win situation, not to have a same idea by everybody, that would be dangerous, but to have similar enough goals which are of mutual benefit and of interest to all. So I think that's very useful especially for small countries which cannot easily afford to have big fights within the country without losing the economic potential.
Indeed, I think we might as well learn some lessons and heed some lessons and perhaps use some in future developments of our own country and hopefully follow in some regards, in some respects, some positive and great footsteps that your country has taken. Thank you very much.
And this is a give and take, of course, with all partnerships. It's not one side is giving and we're all learning all about this. We have an awful lot to learn about this country and very much to appreciate.
Great. Professor Routti, thank you very much. I should say, let me try to pronounce Finland. This is Suomen tasavalta.
That's Republic of Finland.
Republic of Finland.
Yes.
Excellent. Thank you very much for being on our program. Very pleased to have you here.
It's been a great pleasure. Thank you.
It was with us was Professor Jorma Routti. Very pleased to have him with us tonight. Thank you for being with us in our program. We'll see you next time.